Well, hello, we're back. We're in Rotorua, which is where we recorded last night. And tonight's recording is going to be about yesterday, not today, but yesterday. And we've got some notes. Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
So February 9th. Oh, excuse me. Tired too. A couple of early mornings here.
Yeah, we left Auckland.
Left Auckland for Rotorua, and we left on a hired bus.
Right. And we drove through the countryside, which was, it was urban for a while. After all, Auckland has 1.6 million people. It's a third of the entire population of the country. And so many New Zealanders consider Auckland to be a country of its own, separate from them. But we eventually got out of Auckland and drove through the countryside until we got to the town of Hamilton, and we stopped there to visit their gardens, which are pretty fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say anything about the gardens?
Well, the gardens are not a typical botanical garden. There's a number of different gardens. I'm not sure how many. And each garden is of a different style. Like there's a Japanese garden, an Egyptian garden, Mediterranean garden. Let's see. There was even a fantasy garden, which was based on Alice in Wonderland. It was wonderful. It had a huge door and tiles that made you confused as you walked into the garden.
Yeah, they called it a surrealist garden.
Surrealist garden, yeah. What other gardens?
Well, there was a Maori garden.
Mm-hmm.
There was, let's see, I have Japanese, English, Indian char, Italian Renaissance, Maori, let's see, surrealistic, a kitchen garden, an Egyptian garden, and a tropical garden. And I think one of the problems here is that I've got oodles of pictures of each of these gardens. But when I read through a list, it'll be hard to show many. So
yeah,
you're not going to see much about these gardens, not nearly as much as we did. And then we had lunch in the garden, in
the cafe.
In the cafe at the garden. And pretty soon we climbed up back onto the road, the bus, and drove on to a town which I think was called Tyro or something like that. But it was the corrugated galvanized steel capital of the world. And there's some artist in this town that likes to make sculptures out of galvanized, steel, out of corrugated steel. And so right by where we stopped, there was this galvanized steel Jesus. Right. And then there was a dog and a ewe and a ram. And as we drove out of the town, we saw a bunch of other ones too, not nearly as big and elaborate as the ones that we got here, but still. We also were able to get some good ice cream there.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah, really good ice cream. And drove on. Eventually we drove up onto what's called the volcanic plateau, where there was a huge area. Matter of fact, up on this plateau, I think, is the largest lake in all of New Zealand. But as we drove through this, we would see these funny geologic structures, these kind of pointy little cones with stone that came out of the top. And presumably this is sites of these vents where this eruption was occurring and hot silicized rock was coming out, and that was what made the rocks on it. The soil was all very volcanic and very rich as a result. Our next stop was a kiwi hatchery.
And this was so great because what they told us is most people in New Zealand have never seen a kiwi, even though they're called, they call themselves kiwis. And it's advertisements everywhere for kiwis, meaning the people of New Zealand being a kiwi. But they don't see kiwis very much because they're, one, endangered, two, they forage at night, so they're just not likely to be seen, and three, they have burrows, and so they're in the burrow during the day and not very visible. So in trying to save these endangered kiwis, and there are 5 different species of kiwis, one of the species that this particular hatchery works with is the brown kiwi, and they actually have volunteers that help find the eggs and bring the eggs to the hatchery where they're incubated and they hatch. Now, these particular kiwis don't need to have imprinting, so they can be raised in the hatchery until they're adolescent and then released into the wild, and they will survive. So something like of kiwi that are born in the wild, there's 5% live because of all the animals that kill the nesting birds. This was true in Hawaii. They told us that too. Once rats and lynx and some other kinds of animals were introduced, they eat the eggs of the birds that nest on the ground. So we got to see a bird that had hatched the day before we were there, and a bird that was hatching, but it was going very slow, and it had poked its beak through the egg. It was really cute.
Can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah, I was just going to turn to you and say, what would you like to say?
I was just going to say that we don't have any pictures of those because these birds are very sensitive to light. And they said if you accidentally set a flash off, it can cause neurologic damage to the birds. So they don't allow any photography of the live birds. We have a couple pictures of some taxidermic specimens, and you can kind of see what they look like in their size. But we were able to see live adults in special enclosures, where they were, they were naturalistic enclosures. And we were able to go to the hatchery where we actually saw the incubating eggs and the bird that was trying to work its way out. It takes 5 days for it to
5 days
to get out of the shell. And then we saw the baby birds. It was really very cool. And I jumped in, didn't I?
Sorry.
Okay. Well, anyways, we liked that.
It was very cool.
Then we drove on to Rotorua, which was our goal for the day. And there's a big lake in town, and it's kind of murky looking because of all the volcanic residue. And this town, there's steam coming up from different places. It used to be a big tourist center. I think particularly in the late 1800s, it was quite the spa town. And
he said even up into the 1950s. But there was a volcanic eruption, and it destroyed some of the beauty of the. There were some steps that were colorful and some other kinds of things. Anyway, an eruption, a volcanic eruption, took a lot of that stuff out.
Right.
But they still have hot springs and a lot of steam that comes up in the air out of vent holes.
Right. So we saw some of that activity as we drove into town, and it had been a pretty long day for us. So we had dinner. I think Terry had a chicken breast dinner, and I had some nochi. And then we came back to the room and made those 3 videos that you've already seen, if you've been looking at these. So,
which you don't have to.
Anyways, that's it for tonight.
Okay, love.
Bye.
Bye.